Welcome to Unity South Central Region's DEIJB Conversations. I'm Reverend Jackie Fernandez, and I love doing this. Um, this is what our second year together, and this is the second time we've come on the topic, but from year to year, I am changing some of the content, updating it so that those of you who have been with me the whole time are getting something new and fresh to refer to. All right, so you should see my screen there. All right, is that good? Okay, so meet me at the intersection, advocacy and power. And given, what's going on in LA right now, I think this topic is perfectly timed for us. Not that we're going to get too much into the macro experience of power and advocacy, but I think it's relevant, and so we will cover some of that. So let me start with an outline here of what we'll do today. We'll define and explore the concept of intersectionality, which we've done before, and we've done it in a couple different topics, but since we always have a different audience, I think it's important to bring our terminology back around. We'll examine the dynamics of power and privilege in spiritual leadership. And we'll use power mapping, which will be a tool that I'll give to you so that you can use it and apply it to your ministries or to whatever your spiritual community is. So we'll use power mapping to assess and shift influence in ministry context. We'll look at the current events in LA with the protests against the ICE raids and also look at overlaying those power dynamics in our ministries. And then we'll take reflection and action within your sphere of influence because you all have one. So, what is intersectionality? It's coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, and intersectionality recognizes that we often have overlapping systems of discrimination. So, it's not additive, but it's more multiplicative, if that's how you say that word. But so, examples are Black women. So you're Black, which is a marginalized community, and you're a woman, which is a marginalized community. And so the nuances of having both of those, it's not additive in that it actually multiplies your experience of discrimination. So it's like being on the margin of the margin, so to speak. Having a disabled queer youth. So you're marginalized as a youth, often disempowered, the queer aspect of your being and the disabled aspect of your being. So these are the intersections that people experience. Undocumented Latinx families. So again, you kind of can see that we're someone who is Latino, fully, maybe even generationally having U.S. Citizen status is going to have a different experience of power and privilege than someone who is undocumented. Um, and their experiences right now, I would say the lines are very blurred, but typically, if you speak without an accent, without a Spanish accent, or if you don't speak Spanish at all, I'm a good example. I have fair skin, and so I have more power and privilege just based on how I look and how I speak, versus someone, who is not documented, has a very thick Spanish accent, dark skin, so on and so forth. So it's important to presence the impact of having intersectionality in your experience as we understand the dynamics of power and privilege. And I always want to bring things back to ministry. And so when we talk about intersectionality as it relates in ministry, we want to look at congregants and leaders who are bringing layered identities to the table. And some, disabilities are hidden. They are not visible. And so we may not be aware that they are there, but if we can just keep the idea of intersectionality in the cosmos of our thought bubble, if you will, then we can be more readily available to support people. So the risk of invisibility for marginalized groups within inclusive communities. We see this a lot in Unity. We have, this idea that we accept all people, that we affirm all people as a divine expression and having sacred worth. And that is true for us culturally and theologically. And it is probably not as true as we like to think it is practically and in the lived experience. because we are churches and centers made up of people who are influenced by culture and their own, social experiences. So if we just sort of, it's the idea of I don't see color. Well, see color, see a person's blackness and honor it and acknowledge it and celebrate it. See my queerness, honor it, celebrate it. We do the same thing when we say we accept all people and then sort of spiritually bypass any opportunity to really face and have accountability for the structures and the culture in our centers. And are we actually living and practicing church in a way that truly allows people to feel included? So I'm going to give you a tool in a little bit that will offer you some questions and some measures, some ways to sort of measure and map what's happening in your community. And ministry practices can unintentionally reinforce dominant norms. And we see this in the way we pray, in the way we have our music, in the way the timing of our services, the duration of our services. And there are lots of different ways that we just go with the dominant cultural norm rather than unpacking a little bit of what we do and how we create spiritual community. And are we serving people who are on the margins? And if so, how are we doing it? Power and privilege. So, definitions here: power is the ability to influence outcomes or access resources. Privilege is unearned benefits given to dominant groups. And I should actually add resources to that as well. We'll just do that in real time. So privilege is you have, benefits, resources given to dominant groups. You didn't earn them, you just have them because you exist. And the power would be the ability to influence outcomes or access resources. So we see power fluctuating throughout the concept of intersectionality. So a queer person who is white and is a man is going to have more power than a black transgender woman. Does that make sense? So the more aspects and of intersexuality that are present in a person, the more reduced their power is going to be in most scenarios, situations, and places. So we just want to be aware of the power that we hold, especially as ministers, and the privilege that we carry with us. We want to examine both personally and institutionally. In unity, we could say if we put ourselves in the Christian bucket, we probably have less power, right, than the evangelical Christians. So there are different ways to look at who we are as a group, collectively, institutionally, and then also who we are personally, and even just in our individual churches. I think it would be really interesting to compare the unity experience for people in the South or in a community that is very heavily Christian dominant versus maybe on the West Coast where there's a lot more spiritual liberation and uh, openness. So then to think about what kind of power we carry just as a unity movement in different scenarios and cultures. All right, so the current events in Los Angeles. What we have, I don't want to get political about this, but I want us to look at it because, for one, a lot of people are saying the same dynamics are coming to all of our communities. And so, for us to really kind of understand what's happening through the lens of power, privilege, and intersectionality. So, we have ongoing displacement and housing inequities. There are police violence, and there are also protests. And now we have the National Guard that has been brought in, and maybe the Marines. We have LGBTQ rights are under threat. And, I should add immigrant there. And then what faith communities are doing in response. There are people who are out there, and if you look, I always think it's better to look at social media because you get to hear from people who are on the ground, sort of boots on the ground, versus the lens of like big media. And you see people out there feeding each other, bringing each other water. You see faith communities coming out, and what you actually see through the lens of just people who are living in LA and trying to support each other and create a more equitable system are taking care of each other. And this is often, has long been the role of the church in this country, is to provide care and nurturing, nourishment, housing, and all of those things. So when we look at the opportunity to use power and privilege as a spiritual community, we can bring forward our mission statements, our vision statements, our values into action, and that is Unity's fifth principle. So I just wanted to bring that to our awareness and not to get lost in the overwhelm of what's happening, but to really just remember who we are in any given situation and that the opportunity is there for us to live into our values and our theology. All right, power mapping. And this is where I kind of want to spend the bulk of our time. And I'll have some reflection questions that will come back to both this map. So this is a power mapping in ministry. And we're going to do this from kind of a high level. And then the next slide I have is we're going to dive a little bit deeper into it. So if you look at the roles on the left, the senior minister, the board chair, music director, prayer chaplains, which most of our communities have, new members, and longtime congregants. So formal power, it's high with the senior minister, the board chair, medium with the music director, and I would say depending on the size of your prayer chaplains, um, and also the makeup of your prayer chaplains, if you have more longtime congregants in there, they might have more of a medium power. So let's just change that to medium or low. And the new members have very low, longtime congregants, depending on how much investment, what kind of level of givers that they might have more power. So then the informal power, you have senior ministers high, of course. The board chairs medium. I'm getting an internet connection unstable. Are you guys hearing me all right and see me? Jim, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just wondering. I was wondering if you could, if there's some way you can change the view on
Hmm.
yours, because I've got your PowerPoint and you on
Uh-huh.
the big screen part, and then in the side, the gallery, you're also there.
I am.
Do you
Oh,
understand
that's
what I'm
weird.
saying?
Yeah,
I'm seeing two boxes
that's
in
weird.
the
Okay,
middle, the big
sure. Let
part.
me
So
see
the
what.
PowerPoint is really small.
Oh,
That's
gotcha.
oh
How is that better?
yes, thank you.
Great. Thank you for asking. Yes, good, good. Okay, so then, yeah, that's probably hard to read this because it's smaller type than than the rest of it. Thanks, Jim. So then the informal power, um, still senior minister, has the high power. The board chair is would be maybe more less, to a medium, but the music director, and this is really true in my community because Fred Albers has been there for 34 years and he has built a tremendous music program. I call him a legend and I'm not exaggerating. He is a legend. So he has very high but informal power. He's one vote like everyone else. He's not on the board. You know, he doesn't supervise staff. He supervises like our AV team, some of whom are contractors, most of whom are volunteers, and our musicians. But informal power, huge. If Fred is on board, whatever we want is going to happen, right? That's the kind of thing. Prayer chaplains have, informally more of a medium level, and the new members still very low, longtime congregants. They're for sure going to have that high level. I added the high and the medium to the formal power because some ministries have different programs for people who have been there for a long time, and so that might be a more formalized experience there. And then influence on culture. And so I love how this map just sort of separates what's the formal power, like what's the actual, power, like voting, what's really formalized within the ministry, perhaps even in the bylaws or just in the practices and policies, versus the informal power, which is very important to be aware of. And if you've ever had any kind of issues or conflict in your church, you know the power of informal power And then what's the influence on the culture? Senior minister, very high influence on the culture. Board chair, very high. Music director, very high. Prayer chaplains, new members, longtime congregants are going to vary a little bit between medium and low influence on culture. But for those of you who are in ministries that are growing, maybe having a growth spurt, your new members might have more of that medium level influence on culture because if especially if you're getting like an influx of maybe families with kids or an influx of LGBTQ folks, an influx of people of color, or for us, we went through a time where we had an influx of deaf folks, then there will be influence more so of an influence on culture, more of that medium level. Okay, so hold that. And now we're going to go to a deeper level, deeper dive. We're going to look at the type of power, what the church expression is, opportunities for advocacy, and then intersectional questions to ask. So this will be related to your homework, would more be this particular slide. So the types of power, we have positional power, collective power, personal power, and spiritual power. The church expression for positional power, so now I'll go across, would be like the board, the senior minister, and the executive staff, if you have executive staff. I realize most of our ministries are lucky to have staff at all, period. But never underestimate if your only staff person is the office manager, that's your executive staff. um, Opportunities for advocacy, setting policy. The policies that you have in your ministry are huge, and can go a long way in that last one, setting your DEIJB priorities. But approving budgets, your hiring decisions, and as I just said, setting your DEIJB priorities. These are the opportunities for advocacy. So when we take our power and our privilege, we are acknowledging intersectionality, and then we take action to advocate for all of the groups that we say that we are committed to. We accept and we affirm all people. Then that should be reflected in our policy. That should be reflected in how our budgets are designed, what our hiring decisions are, and what our DEIJB priorities are. Do you even have DEIJB priorities? Very important. So that using that positional power, then some of our questions could be who typically holds these roles of positional power? Are they diverse? And that's in all aspects. If you don't have ethnic or racial diversity in your community, you're probably not going to have it at these top levels of board, senior minister, executive staff. However, what are the other ways that you can offer diversity for your community? Do you have generational diversity? Do you have levels of experience, of education, of different types of interests? Are those represented across the board? Or do you have a bunch of accountants on your board? Nothing against accountants, good people to have on your board, but what kind of diversity, especially if you don't already have, which is true for many churches, ethnic and racial diversity, then, do you have LGBT representation? Do you have disability representation? That includes mental health, physical health, all of those aspects. The visible and invisible disabilities is what I'm getting at there. So to really, and this, you know, is an opportunity for your nominating committee to understand the importance of creating diversity in the board, particularly. All right, let's go to collective power. So the church expression of collective power is the congregation, your ministry teams, your affinity groups, and your voting members. And the opportunities for advocacy here are the influence on culture that they have. Who's getting invited to your affinity groups? That's a great opportunity for people who aren't necessarily part of the community on a regular basis, or the Sunday community might be part of your affinity groups. So there's a way to shift norms here, to propose initiatives, accountability for leadership. The collective power has the opportunity to say to the leadership, we want to see diversity here. We want to, create accessibility, and whatever the blocks have been for true diversity to show up in your community, the collective power has the opportunity to advocate for that. They may not realize it. So using your positional power as a minister, or inviting your board to use their positional power to give permission to the collective and to let them know we will respond. But hey, what are the initiatives? Let's have a listening circle and let's find out, how accessible is our building? How accessible are our services? What could we be doing better? So giving permission is a way to acknowledge the power, the positional power, and privilege that you carry, especially as a minister who sits right next to God, even though that's like flies in the face of our theology, it still is some of that religious baggage that comes into the door with people is whatever the minister says. So if the minister is not talking about it, I shouldn't talk about it. So to really be aware of how we can use our positional power to give permission to people to hold us accountable creates a very healthy atmosphere. Intersectional questions for this group. Whose concerns get traction? Who feels safe to speak? If you approach someone and you say, I would really love to hear from you, how comfortable are you here for on a Sunday or in our classes or our other activities? How safe do you feel to speak? And they say, I keep my mouth shut because I tried one time and I was shut down. I was told everyone's welcome here, so I didn't need to worry about whether, my, same-sex marriage and our children or my transgender child was going to be welcome when they had an experience that was really opposite of that. But I tried to bring it up and I was just told, no, no, we welcome everyone. Great opportunity to uncover ways that we can improve our competency in DEIJB for not just the leadership, but also for the collective. Personal power. So the church expression of personal power is in the lay leaders, the prayer chaplains, the music team, the longtime members. So these are people who carry personal power with them just by virtue of their role, but it may not be formalized in the structure of the community. But they are visible. Your prayer chaplains are highly visible, your lay leaders highly visible. They may be up giving announcements, they're maybe leading lots of groups or wearing different hats, multiple hats. Your music team, again, very visible. Even if they wouldn't come to service, if they weren't scheduled to either play in the band or sing a song, they still have some personal power with them because of how much visibility they have in the congregation and your longtime members. So the opportunities for advocacy for this group are to model inclusive language. Are the people on your platform comfortable using their pronouns when they introduce themselves? Are they comfortable adapting and evolving their language so that it is not, ableist? They have an opportunity to mentor others, to, cultivate diverse leadership, to maybe if you have some young adults um, who would be ripe for leadership, but there's no formal way for them to be invited into serving on the board or to serving on the prayer chaplain team. Maybe through mentorship, that's something that could be cultivated. Redirecting harm, rather than spiritually bypassing it or denying it, saying, hey, this is an opportunity here for us to have some accountability. I see that this person is being ostracized, and we're not going to do that here. Elevate marginalized voices. I'm noticing that we have three deaf folks who are coming every week, but we don't always have an interpreter. So sometimes, or they're not being approached at, hospitality or coffee time after the service. No one else is talking to them. What can we do um, to help encourage people to engage with those who are different or being marginalized in the community? So some of our questions are, how do individual leaders use spiritual authority or relational capital to effect change? And I love that phrase, relational capital, because especially in our churches, I think we forget to consider how much weight that carries, unless it's gone sideways, unless someone is like staging a coup or, has a complaint against the minister or the music team or whatever, and they want to get their friends together and complain about the coffee or whatever it is. But there's also a lot of positive ways and constructive ways to use relational capital. With your lay leaders, your prayer chaplains, your music team, your longtime members, they can really influence culture. And it takes a lot of pressure off the board and the senior minister, and it builds into that collective power, the kind of culture that you want to have. So then we go to spiritual power. And so the church expression for us would be our teachings, our sacred texts, our talk themes, our affirmations and practices, and meditation, and lots of unity churches have lots of different practices, so just generalized practices, and our mission and vision statement. And our opportunities for advocacy here are to deconstruct oppressive theology, to really notice when um, metaphysical malpractice is happening. That's an oppressive theology that infiltrates unity very easily if we aren't mindful. Amplify liberation-based teachings, affirm dignity for all, and and I would say to put some action behind that. But we also must speak it. We must be willing to speak that dignity for all. So our intersectional questions here would be like whose theologies are centered or marginalized in teaching, preaching, and prayer? And what is normalized as universal truth, which is, I think, a great question for us to ask. And I would open it up right now for discussion on anything that we saw here because there's a lot here, and I really would like this to be some of your homework if you're willing. And again, your homework is not graded, but we would use it in our fourth Thursday, which will be, I think, on the 26th. Um, we would use it for discussion, and you can always come, and even if you haven't done the homework, and just discuss in real time and think off the top of your head. But I think this is really useful, a really useful tool that I know I will be taking to my staff and my board, and we'll be looking through it and looking for opportunities to also just take it to our lay leaders, take it to our, some of our longtime members. There's such power, and in my community, I don't know if this is true for you all, but I would say two-thirds of our people have been there for decades, and it's very powerful. And I think they're looking, for ways to step into that power, and be an expression of the church. So what are you all thinking? What's striking you? What's standing out to you on this map?
I guess one thing that struck me right away was under type of power. Um, I don't know why this struck me, but that's for the individual. That's uh, fluid. In other words, at one time in my life, I was a new member of a congregation.
Yeah.
Right? Another time in my life, I was a senior, a couple times senior minister, and so on, and of course in the different contexts. Um, so I don't know what that means. I've just sort of noticed it. It just sort of struck me. It's not like individuals are necessarily locked into any of those types of. Oh, I
I
don't know what
love
that
that.
means. Yeah, just
Well, what comes to mind for me when you say that is thinking about people who have served on the board, especially if they've served more than one term, and they come off the board. What we know statistically is oftentimes they leave the church. And I think it's because they lose purpose, right? They lose power and they lose purpose, and we don't have a formalized way to care for those people or bring them back into collective power, bring them back into personal power. It's just sort of like, thank you for your service and you're done, or they're so worn out from what it takes to serve on the board that they're like, I need a break, and then they just don't come back, But if there's a way to really honor those transitions, so I really appreciate that you brought that up because it is fluid. Absolutely. You move from, being a new member or just, a visitor to a new member, and maybe even lay leadership comes up at the same time. Maybe you become a member because you joined the chaplain team or because you joined the music team and whatever you wanted to do in that way is membership is required, so it kind of comes up at the same time. But I think that's a really important um, point to bring up. Thank you.
I guess the opportunities for advocacy and so on would shift every time somebody moves from
Yeah,
one type of power to another, as you put it.
for sure. For sure. What else is coming up? This is good.
Yeah.
I have a question. So when we're modeling inclusive language, which we really try to do as much as we can here, and you're up on the platform on a Sunday morning and you're saying LGBTQTIA plus. Is there a better way to do that?
That's awesome. A great question. I don't like going through all of the letters either, but what I do is sometimes I'll say, and sometimes I'll just say LGBTQ plus plus plus. We want to include everyone, and and sometimes I'll make a joke. I don't want to leave anyone out, so I'm just going to say plus 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 and know that you're represented there. I often just use the term queer, but even with that is can be challenging, not just in the straight community, and of certain generations, but also within the queer community of certain generations. There's a lot of pushback on that word because it was such a slur, and it like I had someone tell me, it just hurts my heart when you say that. Why do you call yourself queer? So we had conversation about it. So, you know, as long as you're educating at the same time, what that does, Gordon, is it lets people know that you understand the language you're using and that you have reason for it. And that's really often the only sort of green flag. Like that's such a green flag. Like, for you to say LGBTQIA plus 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 or LGBTQ plus plus plus, queer community, and to just change it. What I love about even I do this for like the name for God, spirit, universe. I change it so that whoever has a trigger, from God, they get relief from that trigger. Whoever really wants universe, they get relief when they hear me say that. And I just try to kind of rotate. I put no science to it. I don't have a schedule for it, but I do it enough that those who are around and who are with us get that exposure. And what they understand is my openness and my care.
Thank you.
Yeah. What else is coming up?
Well, just on the initials thing
Hmm.
brought up. So, I mean, I'm not currently involved in a ministry on a regular basis, but suppose, um, like sometimes you actually say what each of those initials stands for. We welcome we welcome all people, and then say the community of blah 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 blah. Right? Say all of them,
Yeah.
or just or general. What would that be like? Generally, we welcome all genders, all
Gender expression.
all all orientations,
And identities. Yeah, gender identities and
identities.
expression.
Okay, I'm just trying to
Yeah.
think of
I
okay,
like to
what can you
use,
substitute for the initials so that people kind of
yeah, that's so good. I love using gender expression and identity because for some people it's very fluid, and so gender expression fits better. And then some people it's part of their identity. So I like to use that. But yeah, that's so good. Anytime, and if you're changing it, one, it shows your competency around it. It shows your comfort in using the language, and it models for other people that that's the easy part. Like learning the language is the easy part, and we can do that, and it normalizes that. And then, in the same way that using introducing yourself with your pronouns normalizes it for anyone else who might be afraid to share their pronouns. If you're doing it, especially as the minister or anyone on the platform, it's a huge permission slip for everyone.
hmm,
And it makes a statement to that collective group. This is who we are. Yeah, I love
hmm.
it. Alrighty. I'm going to go to the next one, which gives us some questions. Where do you hold power in your ministry? Who is left out of decision making? How might intersectionality inform pastoral care? And what is one small shift you can make toward equity? So, using the power mapping in ministry tool combined with these questions for reflection, and it would be so good. Like extra credit if you take this to your board, or if you have like a ministry leaders group or your prayer chaplains. Um, I mean, just imagine if we all did that in every unity ministry, the transformation that could happen for us, and for the competency that collectively as a unity movement that we would grow. So, does anyone want to just speak to any of these questions? Is there one that's really poking at you or got you kind of, hmm?
Yeah, we're working on an amendment to our bylaws right now for a group that we don't mention hardly ever, and that's our online congregation. We
Nice.
have about 100 people in attendance on Sunday in person, and about 200 online, and they're regular people that support us, that take our classes online.
Hmm.
And so one of the things that we are working on, it's already in process for getting ready for to present at our annual meeting, is an amendment for online membership
I
and
love
what
it.
all that would look like
Yeah,
and how we can have, and there will actually be an online board member, a virtual board member.
love it. That's great. I love it.
That's
That's and
really interesting.
who is left out of decision
That's
making?
like a new whole new thing, isn't it?
Hmm.
Yes, because I couldn't find anybody else who's done it. I asked out
Right.
there, on the
Yeah.
Facebook group and all that. And
Right.
I don't think anybody's done it. And nobody at UWM could really, they didn't know either. They basically said, let us know when you get it done.
Yeah. You get to be a pioneer, Gordon.
Yeah,
Be a
I think
pioneer.
there are lots of ministries who are allowing for online membership, but to have a designated board spot.
Yeah, we get a
Yeah.
lot of support from our online congregation.
Hmm. And what a way to validate that. And that makes me think of the question that people often ask, well, how can we, how can we encourage our online groups to support, which is a different way of saying how can we monetize our online congregation, you know. But what a way to validate them by giving them a place, a voice at the table. And so it solidifies identity, it validates, being an online participant. Um, I think it's brilliant. Let us know how it goes.
I
Yeah,
don't know.
that's what I was
I'll
thinking.
put it in the Facebook group once we get it done.
Yeah, for sure. It's like I named, I don't know, a couple years ago, at if you ever were at UCOP back when we had the building in the old day, there was a balcony and there were certain kinds of people who sat in the balcony and it was like a whole thing. Well, one day I just said, and to those of you in our virtual balcony on Facebook and YouTube, and my phone blew up from people who were in the balcony on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you, I feel seen. I mean, it was just outrageous. It gave them place, it gave them identity, and it made them feel included.
One of the
And so
things
that's
that I do,
really like taking hold. So I do that every week, you
yeah,
know.
one of the things I do during our service is there's times where I'm sitting. I'm on my phone on our Facebook page and
Hmm.
I say hi to every single person whose name I see.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and um, and then when we do the welcome, we specifically welcome our online congregation.
That's awesome. Do you have
When
everyone
I
turn to
say
the
hi, I
camera
do
and
it by
wave?
name. Do I what?
Do you have everyone turn to the camera and wave?
Occasionally, it drives my AVLM people nuts because they don't have the camera focused on the
Right.
congregation.
Right. I
Yes, I
that
do.
was done at Unity of Columbine Spiritual Center in Boulder, Colorado. And it just, yeah, I heard from people who were watching online of like how much they loved that. Like they felt, oh, they're looking at me, even though they can't, they can't see you, but oh, everyone's looking at me. So,
What we found out by doing that was, there's a lot of people that unless they put something in the chat, you won't, in the comments, you
exactly,
don't know they're there. But when
exactly,
we started doing that, all of a sudden the comments and stuff started picking up because people
exactly.
wanted to hear their name.
Exactly. Totally. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And to just, again, it justifies, it validates, because a lot of times people will like apologize. Well, I should come more often in person, but I really got used to being in my pajamas and I'm like, it's okay. Just tune in. We feel your presence. We are one. There is only one presence. And thanking them for attending just the way we thank people as they're walking out the door. Thank you for being here, to really justify that. And I'll still hear from, board members who are like, well, if we could just get them to come in person. And it's like, but why? You know, why? Why do they need to conform to the way you want to count attendance, is
Well, and
often what it comes down to.
a lot of them live far away,
Yeah.
or maybe for health reasons can't come.
Hmm.
We have congregation all over the U.S. now, and
Nice.
even overseas. We have some
Yeah.
regulars.
Yeah. Yeah. In our last one, we had someone from England and someone from Canada, in our last membership class.
Yeah.
But we haven't gone as far as designating a board spot. I really love that idea. That would be something I might work on.
Yeah, basic.
I'll wait and see how it goes for you.
That we've got so far.
Hmm.
So,
I love it. Any other questions that are on the screen? Where do you hold power in your ministry? Are you comfortable with the power you hold? How might intersectionality inform pastoral care? Small shift you can make toward equity. I mean, these are the questions, right? All right, before we run out of time, I've got tools for equity in ministry. And these are just some ideas, maybe things that you're already doing or you've been trying to do or working on, rotating leadership roles. I would add to that actually something that's really important to me that I have not, it's been a struggle in my ministry because of, you always arrive to a community that has done things a certain way for a certain amount of time, is rotating prayer chaplain lists, call lists. I think it's really important, and I was brought up in a community where that was done. Every year as a prayer chaplain, you got a new call list. And I loved that because then I got to know more people. But I came into UCOP who had the longest serving prayer chaplain when I got here had been serving for 20 years and had been calling the same people. Just so she gets to keep her prayer list. And over the last 4.5 years, the rest of them have come to understand that it's really important and valuable to rotate the prayer list. She gets to keep hers. And, some people have come off of her prayer list because either they've died or they've moved away and they're no longer answering. And so just slowly over time, like asking the question, well, if that person's not answered you for 5 years, there's someone else who's not getting called, you know, and would you be open to having someone new added? So we don't take away, but when she's ready to have someone new added, we add someone to hers. But, like working with these sort of cultural parts and the sort of human dynamics, can be challenging. It can be a dance. But rotating leadership roles is so important, so very important, and especially with our boards as well. Those term limits are critical. Transparent communication about decision making. Communication highlighted there, like transparent communication, period, but especially about decision making. How did you come, Gordon, to the decision to designate a chair for the online community, or a board position for the online community? How did, if you all of a sudden start using pronouns when you introduce yourself on the platform, how did you come to that decision? I had an experience recently where we made a change of having our ASL interpreter stand next to, just behind whoever the speaker is, typically me, but whoever's speaking for the talk. And I didn't say anything. I was in communication with the deaf community, and that part of the service was really important to them because if they have to look to stage right, or if they're sitting, so they're looking to the left to see the interpreter, but they want to catch my body language, they're watching like a ping pong match, a tennis match, back and forth. And so in one feedback survey, they said it would be really great if the interpreter could stand next to whoever's giving the talk. So we started doing that. I was looking for feedback from the deaf community because that's who that was serving. Didn't say anything to the general community. And a few weeks later, I mean, it took a few weeks. I think people were just kind of, oh, this is new. But a few weeks into it, I started getting complaints, both from the online audience and congregation and from the in person. And I thought, if I had just told them why we were doing it, they would probably not be complaining. They might not like it, but they might be more willing to get used to it. And so I apologized to the community. I was like, I'm so sorry. I missed an opportunity to let you in on why this decision was made, why we're doing this. And then it was a non-issue. But that transparent communication is so important, and often in ways that we don't even realize. It might seem mundane or unimportant or small, but for some people, church, everything about church is so big and important, as we know. Story circles to share diverse experiences, the power of telling stories, the power of people even asking the question, if you're doing any kind of anti-racism work, and sitting in circle and asking if anyone is willing to share experiences they've had in their spiritual community of racism, of discrimination, of feeling othered or left out, and just, allowing that space. Now, I would say there's a lot of work that needs to be done before getting there, but the power of sharing our experiences. And sometimes, it could be, part of that path to getting there is just sharing what your experience at school was, what your experience at work was, or just, your family experience going out and, in public at a restaurant. And all of that can just be very eye-opening to what it takes for, certain people to cross the threshold just into your building, especially the queer community, just to walk into a church. It's a very important way to cultivate compassion and empathy when we can sit and listen to each other's stories. Accessible worship spaces and programming, and asking the question by those who need the accessibility, is this really accessible? And how does the way we've designed this accessibility, how do you feel? If you're having to use a ramp that's over on the opposite side of the building and then you have to come through the whole building to get to where you're trying to go, that probably doesn't feel too good. So just asking the questions. Acknowledge and address harm when it occurs. Acknowledge and address harm when it occurs. That's, the flip side of accountability, or when we are being accountable to our values, to our vision, to our mission statement, to our theology. Then we're going to acknowledge and address harm when it occurs. And we're going to do it with compassion and with love, but also with honesty. Any thoughts about any of that? Do those feel like tools you can embrace and use and be
I
useful?
like the story circles. As I was sitting here, I realized, would it be okay if the people who are here could like say their name and where where they where they are located and what they're up to? So, 'cause I realized, oh, there's only a few of us here. We might as well know
I love it.
know names
Why
and
don't
stuff.
you start, Jim?
Okay, Jim Gaither. I live in Lee Summit, Missouri. I do mostly adjunct teaching for different institutions. So, and once in a while, Sunday talks in different places. Um, so that's that's my story. Oh, I'm also on the USCR board, and I'm sort of the representative to this group or of this group or whatever. So, uh, main reason I'm here, I suppose, but I am very much interested in the topic.
Thank you, Jim.
Uh,
All right, well, I'll go next. I'm Gordon Kyler. I'm the senior minister here at Unity Spiritual Center in Albuquerque.
Welcome, Gordon.
Gordon.
My name's Arlise Bradley. I'm LUT, currently living in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, and I just speak around. I speak at Tulsa, Unity Center of Tulsa on a regular basis, Unity Center of Joplin on a regular basis. I lived in Joplin about 20 years, so I'm that was my church home at that time. And living here in Bartlesville, I also, on every fifth Sunday, speak at the Unitarian Universalist Church.
Well,
So I just love to share this message. Anybody who'll listen gets it.
for you, Arlise, was it? Did you say your name again?
Arlise, Arlise, that's correct.
Arlise. Okay. Nice to meet you, Arlise.
Wonderful meeting you again. We've all met before.
Yeah, yeah. It's just you don't have your name on there, and I was like, what?
Oh, yeah, I don't know how to do that.
Okay.
I have to get
For
my
that,
husband.
Jim.
Al would do it. He can do
Yeah,
it.
but I didn't know where you were. I didn't know where Gordon was. So
Yeah, yeah.
nice to know.
It's good to see
Thank
everyone.
you. Oh, and
And I'm
yeah,
I'm
what's your name?
currently
You
Deb.
the person
Me.
with the slides.
Right. What is my name? I am, senior minister at Unity Church of Overland Park, currently in Tucson, Arizona. So having a little vacation.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. All right. I want to close with this affirmation. We cannot heal what we do not acknowledge. May we lead with love, listen with humility, and dismantle with courage. I give that to you as your blessing in the work that you do, however you do it, that you are a leader for the work of love. And I bless you in that. And I thank you for blessing me with your presence.
Thank you.
So
Thank you,
we
Thank
will
you,
Jim.
meet.
Reverend Jackie.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Lisa, Jim. Good
We
to
will
see
meet
both of
again
you
on June
too.
26th to reflect on these ideas and really get into it. And I will send out the power map with those reflection questions. And even if you don't come back on the 26th, I encourage you to use that in whatever way is useful for you and your ministry. And then on the second Thursday in July, we'll be talking Ain't No Privilege Like the One I've Got.
That
Mm,
title.
All
You're going to play the
right.
song that inspired it?
Yeah, for
absolutely.
sure. All right. Thank you all. Have a
Thank you,
wonderful day.
everybody.
Peace.